recording to, which means I should be recording a video to right there. And then when class is over with, I'll upload it. So you should, I'll put this video up on the network or up on YouTube. How I get you that YouTube link, I'm not sure yet. I sometimes do in a lot of classes that are going to go longer, I do what's called a band page, which is like a social media place for us to share it. More than likely, what I will do is I will post in that link section my YouTube page, and I'll just start putting them in a playlist, so you can go to that playlist and just see what's new every time I record these. So try to remind me if I get started for some reason and forget to get this stuff up and going. Remind me, and I'll start it over. So, all right. So what we're going to do a little bit of today is we're going to get Toon Boom open. We're going to talk about the folder structure of Toon Boom. Weenie Hut Jr. We're going to talk about the folder structure of Toon Boom, what it is that's actually happening there, how we have to kind of keep our projects organized. We're going to talk a little bit about the drawing tools, and at that point you'll probably be tired of learning about Toon Boom. So then we'll just use Toon Boom to do some sketching. Okay, so then we'll start talking a little bit about character design and how to kind of focus our design elements to make them more appropriate for animation. So how do you open Toon Boom Harmony? The annoying thing is if I start typing Toon Boom down here in the bottom, T-O-O-N, it doesn't seem to be on here, right? It's because for some reason the name of the software as an icon is Harmony Premium, not Toon Boom Harmony Premium. So start typing Harmony, and you'll see right there, Harmony Premium. So go ahead and click that. We should have 20 licenses of that, so everybody should be able to get in. Okay. So you're getting a similar screen to this little splash screen that opens up. So I know it's very tempting to just say, create scene, hurry, I want to get in there and animate. But this is asking some important questions, so let's talk about it. Frame rate, we have it set at 24 frames a second, which means that for every second of animation, we're going to see 24 images. We'll talk about that a little bit later. That doesn't mean you always have to do 24 drawings. Sometimes people will do a drawing on every other frame and just hold that for 2 frames. That's called animating on twos. Okay. The size, 1920 by 1080, that's HD 1080. That's the minimum we're going to want to work in. So let's go ahead and leave it there at that. But these top 2 questions here, name and location, that's the important part, because everything that I do in Toon Boom, it saves out files all over the place, right? And if you don't know where it's saving all of that stuff, the next time you go to open it, you'll have lost it all, right? Like you can't just take a Toon Boom Harmony file and throw it on your hard drive and everything goes with it. There's a bunch of vector files that come with that. There's audio clips, there's palettes, all of those things are built into a folder structure. So what it's asking is, where do we want to put that folder structure? If you have a hard drive with you, I would recommend that as one of your options. You could also use that DIGM students folder. So again, if you go up here, resources, do / ETSU E3, you can do DIGM students, and you can put a folder under share, and you can temporarily work there. We wipe that every semester, so don't leave it there too long. Like this is more of a temporary place to store it until you bring your hard drive and back it up, right? You'd probably be able to fit most of this on jump drives. Like if you get a 32 gigabyte jump drive, you're probably fine. I saw that Best Buy has those on sale right now for like $14 or something. So where I'm going to put mine is in this DIGM faculty folder. This is sort of my like work area where I can save stuff and use it for reference later. So, so when it asks me that question, I want to guide it up to here. Right? So I'll go under Browse for location, and I can type //ETSUE3, hit enter, go to DIGM faculty, I'll choose Marlowe, Greg in class, and I already made a 2D animation 2018 folder here. Select that folder. And I'm going to name this, for right now, week 1, okay? You can name yours something else. I'm naming this week 1 because I'm going to keep coming back to this as sort of a demonstration area. Later, you'll be making your character for the dance scene. You may want to name that dance character or something like that. But I'm just going to go ahead and call this week 1 and say create scene. And it's going to, did I click it? Not responding. It'll respond. Just give it a second. There it goes. So this is Toon Boom. A lot of familiar elements and a whole bunch of stuff that is probably seems familiar, but is not going to do what you think it does, right? So we're going to talk about a lot of that in the next few minutes here. Before we jump into what happens in Toon Boom, though, I want to show you what just got created, right? So in that folder, BIGM faculty, Marlowe, Greg in class. There. So it created this week 1 folder for me. And if I open that up, you'll see that I have environments, frames, jobs, palettes, right? Currently, I do not have a scene, right? If I go to, let's just draw something really quick. I got a brush here. I'm gonna draw that nice file, save. Now if I go up here and look, well, now I have all of these things here, right? So this X stage file at the bottom, that is the file that we would double click to open up Toon Boom, right? If you're going to just go in here and double click and open this up. However, where I just drew that swirly thing, like it's going to store that in elements, right? So it's storing those there. And then later, when I'm done with my animation, if I want to export it out, it will export it out under frames. You'll also see palettes. That's my color palettes. So let's say you are working on a larger project. Let's say you're doing an animated series, right? A web series for YouTube. And you have a character that always wears the same color of hat and shirt and has the same like shadow and skin texture colors. And you need them to be the same across every episode. You can save out that color palette for that and share them across that episode. So this is a little confusing because I can't just hit File, Save As, and make another X stage. Right? We'll talk about that in a little bit here. But if I try to make a new saved file, it will create an entirely new directory structure underneath this directory structure, and you'll just start nesting this deeper and deeper, and that's not the correct way to do that. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but right now I'm just saving one file over and over under this project, right? That's usually not the way we like to encourage people to work, but that's okay. So we'll come back to that when necessary. Right now, let's talk about how to draw stuff in here. Or let's talk about the interface a little bit, actually. So you'll notice a couple of things, very similar to like Photoshop, Flash, all of that. Down here along the left side of our screen, right, we have all of our tools. We have some selection tools up there at the top with the arrows, right? How many of you have used Illustrator? Okay, most of you. So these selection tools are similar, right? You have like the object select tool and the like element select tool. I don't remember what they're called specifically in here. It looks like the mouse over. That's the select tool, and this is the contour editor. Okay, so Harmony is a relatively decent illustration program as well. Right? It's not amazing, but it has a lot of illustration tools. And it can be either raster or vector. Okay, so you can illustrate in vector in here, like in Illustrator, or you can illustrate in raster, like in Photoshop. Okay? I usually use the raster layers if I'm going to do some sketchy stuff, and then I do my final illustrations in vector. But whichever one you're drawing in will depend on the type of layer you're drawing on. So down here at the bottom, or menu, like down at the bottom of the screen, these are our layers. And you'll see that, can you see all this all right? Do I need to turn the lights down? Is it too bright? Yeah, let's do those just a little bit. Yeah, that's what I'm actually doing. So let's do like, you know, as long as I've been here, you think I know how to work the lights. Is that a little better? Okay. Feel free to adjust them however you need to if you want to change it. So we have our drawing layer here, right in the bottom. And it is currently a vector layer, okay? So let's go ahead and draw on it to see how that works, okay? There are two different tools we can use to draw. We can use this paintbrush tool, and you'll see when I activate that, I have a whole bunch of options over here on this side of the screen, right? I'm not going to worry about those too much just yet. I'm just going to draw. So you should have pressure sensitivity, meaning if you push a little harder, the line will get a little thicker. And we can do that. Again, Control Z will undo that. All of this stuff that I'm drawing, though, I'm drawing vector shapes. Okay? So that means if I go back to my selection tool, I can grab this shape, move it, I can skew it, I can do whatever I need to it, right? I can also use this other selection tool to warp it, right? I can do stuff like this to it, right? So very similar to what I can do in Illustrator in terms of illustration, I can do that to my lines in here, okay? We'll get a little more complex with this later because there's some really neat things that we can do illustration-wise. I will show you a couple of interesting things. Right now when I'm using my paintbrush, it's kind of like using the blob brush in Illustrator where I'm really painting a shape, right? You'll notice that after I go in here and select this, it has tangent points or edit points on both sides of it, right? I can grab this one, I can adjust these Beziers for it, I can make it bigger here, right? So this is a mass that I'm painting, right? Sometimes we want to paint a stroke, like a line. And that's what the pencil tool is for. So right below the brush tool is the pencil tool. And so when I draw this, it does not have a mass to it. It is a single line with a thickness, right? Which means if I adjust this tangent, it's going to adjust the entire line. So there's not really a right or a wrong way of using this, but more of just a whole bunch of different illustration tools that will allow you to make whatever style of illustration you want to make. A couple of the cool things about the pencil tool, I'm going to go ahead and just draw some crosshatch lines here, right? If I wanted to clean this up a little bit, we have some options in here. So if I click on this top arrow, the select tool, you'll see this cutter tool. And what this will allow us to do is sort of drag select and trim off unwanted pieces. Right? So we can do stuff like that to get a little bit of a neater drawing. So it's the, up here at the very top with our select tool, it's underneath that. So if you tap it, it'll expand out this list. And I'm just choosing cutter. And it'll only do this on pencil lines, right? So if I draw something like this, and this, and this. I'm just trying to get some stuff in here so you can see it. Then I can use this cutter tool to trim off any lines from the intersections of that. So it's actually a really nice, quick way of doing that. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't connect them all together, though. So if you zoom in here really close, you'll see they're not perfect. But for most cases, they're close enough. And there is a way of connecting those together later if we want to. I know this is maybe going a little too in depth right now. I can select all these pieces, and I think it is, let's see. Merge pencil lines right there. And that will put them all together into one piece, right? So I just want to show you some of these tools. It's going to take some time and some practice to get used to them and how you want to use them. It's also going to be a little bit of discretion depending on what sort of style you want to create, right? If you want to make Steven Universe style animation, you're probably going to use pencil brushes or pencil lines with like different weighting on it, and then stills. But then like there's other types of animation where it's just solid shapes with no outline at all. So really just think of like what style of animation or what style of illustration you're going to create. Maybe something. Discover the issue. Okay, I'll be right back. Keep messing with that. I gotta get another cord. Okay. All right, so this is, I guess I'm not going to spend an enormous amount of time teaching you all of the different drawing tools and all of the different tricks for them. I think probably the better way is for you to learn those as you're working on a project. I am going to hopefully share some videos with you soon that will have some tutorials and stuff like that that you can watch that have like some additional drawing tools. So, did you have a question? So that the color tool only works with the drawing. So try that out some drawing. Yeah. Oh, so you can draw that. Then the color tool. Okay. So again, like, there are times when you want all of the lines to be very clean, all merged together, but like really it's also just like, it's whatever you want to appear on your screen, right? So there's different levels of cleanliness or like organization that you would want to work with depending on your style, right? If you plan on doing a lot of limited animation, meaning you need to be able to move stuff on top of other things, then maybe it's a little cleaner. But if you're just drawing frame after frame, it's like doing a digital painting, right? Now, this is always going to be in vector though, on this layer, okay? I will show you kind of quickly, if I hit this little plus sign right here, I can add another drawing layer, right there. And when I do, it asks me a couple of questions here. One, it asks for the name. I'll go ahead and call this one raster layer, right? And it asks, do I want my line art to be in vector or bitmap? And do I want my color art to be in vector or bitmap? I'm just gonna go ahead and choose bitmap for both of those and hit apply and close. Now, what you'll notice is on a raster layer, we have different options, right? The pencil options here are different. I can get some textured brushes here, so I can paint in this like pastel look, right? But all I can do to manipulate this is move it around, okay? It's like a Photoshop layer now, which means if I stretch it too far, it's gonna start getting pixelated, okay? So it's just painting a bunch of pixels. Again, this is completely your choice on how you do this. My 2 cents though is you have more options to edit the drawing later if it's in vector. You have more shading options if it's in raster. But I have a tendency to work more in vector just because I can reuse stuff and I can manipulate stuff and warp stuff later. So, either way, that means that we have 2 pretty decent sketching or drawing tools in here. Now, we will dig a little deeper into this later. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and delete my layers here, turn this one back on. Now, I'll show you a couple of these options I had over here a minute ago. On my layer, there's these little eyeballs out here on the end. That's how I turn my visibility on and off for that layer. Right? And for a lot of this stuff, if you mouse over it and just let your mouse sit there, it will pop up a little description of what it is that button does. So right now I'm mousing over that next button and it says solo mode. That means if I had, let's say I had a character, or I had 5 characters running on screen, right? But I just wanted to focus in on one of them, I could click that and just play back the animation on that one layer, and all of those other layers would disappear, right? I also have this little stack of pancakes here. This is my onion skinning. This will allow me to see frames before and after my current frame. And then I have this lock here, which will allow me to lock that layer so I can't do anything to it, right? So, there's a lot to this. Again, we can study this for a long time, and you'll learn more drawing tools the more drawings you try to make. I think you're going to learn a lot of these once we start doing our first character design for the dance piece. Okay, so I think in the illustration process of that, trial and error, you'll learn the way that you like to illustrate with this program. Couple of things that I didn't really cover, I'll hit them really quickly. Say I draw a circle here. Let's say I wanted this to be a red bouncing ball, right? I have this paint bucket, and I have my palettes over here on this side. So I can choose red and paint fill that bucket, right? Now, if I did not close my circle well enough, let's say I did something like that, and then I go to try to paint bucket that, it's not working, right? Because it's not an enclosed space. There are a couple of options I can do to fix that. I can go ahead and enclose that by finishing up that drawing. But I also have over here in my drawing options, you see this little half closed circle thing here? If I click that and say close large gaps, sometimes it will work. Like it'll try to figure out where that gap is and close it. Apparently that's still a little too big for it, so just kind of show you what I'm talking about here. Say that's the gap size, right? Do it. Still too small, or still too big. Let's crank that thing way up there. Like that. Apparently its definition of large gap is much larger than that gap. So let's draw, say it's like that, where it's actually not that big of a gap, but you get that, right? Should work now. There we go. So we'll still fill it in, but that's just something to recognize that like it's a good idea to kind of close in your gaps there for that reason. It doesn't mean that that's how you have to do that. Like we could have drawn a giant blobby mass and then drawn an outline outside of that. Like there's a whole bunch of different ways we could get a similar style, right? And there's also plenty of animations that have no outline at all, right? That this is what the shapes will look like and that they won't have a distinctive inking line around it. Now here's the cool thing. I just flooded that with this red color, right? But let's not think of that as red. Let's think of that as our ball color. In fact, we'll go ahead and name it that. All right? Oh, do that. There you go. Select my object. So we'll just call this ball color, right? And we'll call that the black line. We'll just go ahead and leave it as black. Let's say I don't want my outlines to be black anymore, but I've already drawn all these objects, and I'm like, you know what? I'd rather them be dark gray, or I would rather them be dark red to go along with this red ball, right? I can click on this color and change it, and now my outlines will all be that dark red color. So anything that has that that black line, or anything that has that ball color, let's say this ball, I don't want it to be red anymore, I want it to be yellow, right? And I still want the outline to be. So anything that I use that palette item for, I can recolor the entire thing just by changing that palette color. Okay, it's the color is sort of systematically throughout the whole thing, and that's good because let's say your art director comes back to you and says, you know that green dinosaur, we need it to be purple, and you're like, I have 7 different greens in this thing, I have to go through and recolor all of it. Like you can layer, or you can change it one time and it'll update in every shot. You don't have to go flood every drawing, right? Okay. So I'm going to simplify here just a little bit again, delete all of this stuff. So on our screen right now, you'll see like we got this little box, right? Within that box is what is going to show in your animation, okay? So I can draw stuff out here, doesn't matter. We're only ever going to see what is inside of this area. This is sort of our stage, right? Which means if I want some ball to bounce in from outside, I can start it outside of the frame and then animate it into this box, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing a really simple animation. I'm just going to draw a circle, and I'm just going to animate it sort of shooting to the other side of the screen, okay? And I'm going to show you kind of how our timeline works for that. So, for each of our drawings here, we'll go ahead and name this ball, okay? This layer is called a drawing, okay? This is where it gets a little confusing. The layer is called a drawing. So this is the ball drawing. That drawing can have, bless you, that drawing can have multiple frames, okay? So it seems like that doesn't make sense. It should seem like every frame is its own drawing, but this layer is considered a drawing or a drawing layer, right? So you'll see that now on our timeline, we are on frame 1, right? And if I drag it further out through here, nothing really changes. We got a little bitty tick mark there. I'll zoom in here a little bit closer, you'll be able to see that a little bit better. Just using this little magnifying glass thing to do that. So you'll see my little tick mark there, and it's on that first gray square, okay? So if I draw a circle here, I'll do it with my red. You see that right? Yeah. So I'm going to draw a circle here, okay? That is what is on frame 1, or that is frame 1 of my ball drawing, okay? Now if I go to frame 2 or 3, there's nothing there, okay? If let's say I go out to frame 2 and I draw another ball, like frame 1 is still there, right? So I just drew another frame on that drawing. Now you'll notice that when I did that though, this one is a little bigger than this one. I can use my greater than, less than keys to sort of step back and forth between those two. But you'll notice that like it got a little bigger, it's not the same. That is what our onion skinning is for. So if I go all the way back here on my layers, the little stack of pancakes, if I click that stack of pancakes, you'll be able to see the previous drawing, right? And so this will help me when I hit greater than, less than, to be able to see what my current drawing is and what the next one is going to look like, right? And so that means I could go in here now and I can sort of shrink this to be a little closer to my previous ball size, right? I can also move it. Like I could say, no, I didn't want it to go that far. I just wanted it to go that far. And so now that's the distance. Now, whenever I want to turn that onion skinning off, I just uncheck that stack of pancakes and you'll see that that's the animation I'm getting, right? Now, if I go out, I have frame 1 and frame 2, right? If I go out to frame 10, here, again, there's nothing on there. Right? I'm going to click my pancakes again. And you'll see that I'm not seeing the previous frame. The reason for that is this little blue line that is here, that's above my arrow, that's showing you the range that I'm able to see within my onion skinning. So I can also sort of adjust that all the way back and forward, right? And I'll be able to see, you know, like multiple frames before and after, right? So I'm going to go out here to frame 10. That's when I want it to be on the other side of my screen. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and draw my ball on the other side of the screen on frame 10, right? So probably something like that. Something about the right size. There we go, right? So what you'll see now that happens, so I turn off my onion skinning, is frame 1 is there, frame 2 is there, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 all look exactly like frame 2, right? And if you look at my timeline there, that makes sense, right? I really just have 3 frames that I've drawn. I have frame 1, I have frame 2, and frame 2 is holding for the next 8 frames, right? And then I have frame 10. Now, if I want to start breaking that down more, I can do that. Right? I can go in here, and let's say I want to like half this, right? I want to say, where is this at halfway through this animation? If I just start drawing on this, I'm still going to be drawing on frame 2. So I have to create a new drawing on it. So I can do a new empty drawing, which is this button right here. See that? Or I can do a new duplicate drawing. Now, a new duplicate drawing will basically just duplicate the current drawing I'm on, but if I change it, it's not going to mess it up, right? I'm just going to go do a completely new drawing, and you'll see that by doing that, it kind of cut that in half. Right? Turn my onion skinning back on, and I'm going to have my ball about halfway in between this. A little on the small side. There we go. Actually, I'm going to give it a little bit of stretch in that direction. Okay. So you'll see, again, frame 1, frame 2, frame 5, frame 10. Now, at any point, we can hit play and watch this. Okay, so if I hit this play button, it's going to play all the way to the end, and then hit play again. We can see our animation, right? It's playing 60 frames. I don't really want to see all 60 of those. So I can grab this little red line here, pull that all the way back, and hit play. We can watch it. And if I hit this loop button right here, if I hit play, we'll play it over and over again, right? I know that was just a machine gun of information. I just firing it off. Have I lost anyone? Anybody have questions on this? Let me slow down for a minute. Okay, cool. So interestingly, you can now use this. Like, that is all you really need to know to be able to start creating animations, right? Like, we've done it. Like, it's moving. Not great yet, right? But all that's really different here is the quality of the animation, or the quality of the illustrations and the number of frames, right? So all animation is a series of images that change frame to frame, right? And they change in a way that makes it look, or makes it appear, as if that object is moving, right? That ball is not moving. In fact, it's not even a ball. It's just some pixels, right? All that's really happening is these pixels are changing to give you the illusion that this illustration is moving, right? So you can do this in whatever way you wanted to, right? You could cut out pictures from photographs, put them in here. move them a little bit, paint over them, draw them. You can draw every frame like this perfect illustration. You can do it with photographs. You can do it with clay, like whatever it is you want. We're going to be able to craft motion with that. So you're going to have a little leeway throughout this class on what it is you, or how it is you create each of these frames and make them appear to move. We're going to get into this a little bit more next class period. But I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. So what I want this to look like is I want it to look like the ball slowly starts moving, right? Like it starts to accelerate. And then I want it to look like it slams on the brakes, goes past this point, and then kind of bounces back, right? Kind of like springs to a stop, right? Those are two different animation principles. It's called slow in, slow out, as the sort of accelerating, like building up speed, right? It means you're leaving that first keyframe slowly and accelerating, right? And then the shooting past it and coming back is called overshoot or overlapping action, right? So let's just kind of play around with that, and you can see the difference in these drawings, right? So I'm going to go relatively fast in doing this. Go ahead and turn on my onion skinning again. Right, so we got that. This drawing here, you saw that for drawing 2, I had it moving just a very small amount. Right? Or maybe even make that a little smaller. For this next drawing, I'll go ahead and create a new one. I want to let it move a little bit bigger or a little bit further. All right. Changing my onion skinning range here a little bit so it's not as confusing. Okay, right there. So I'm going to let this one move a little bit further. I usually keep my hand on Control Z. Control Z will undo. And so that way when I'm drawing, if I'm not happy with it, I just Control Z and do it again, right? And so this is sort of an illustration practice. You can always tweak it a little bit if you want to, but so you're seeing that the distance that the ball is traveling each frame is getting a little bigger each time, right? So maybe here, I'll get it about halfway in between there and start to stretch it just a little bit more, right? And so now if I hit play on this, you'll see how it kind of speeds into that, right? Like it slowly starts to accelerate and go faster, right? Actually, didn't. It's the wrong spot. There we go. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do on this last one, I'm going to go ahead and pull this back just a little bit. Okay. For my last keyframes here, my next few keyframes, I want the ball to hit this point really quickly. So I'm going to do it all in like 2 frames, right? So my next keyframe here, I'm going to add a new one. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the shortcut for that is it F7? Maybe? No. F5? It's not F5. No, cancel. Oh, never mind. We'll just hit this button here. So I'm going to have the animation all the way here. Right, so it's almost all the way there again. I'm going to have it slow down a little bit here. and then sort of spring backwards. Too big. Something like that. One more time. So in those 10 frames, what I should have now, and I'll go ahead and let it hold that last frame for a little longer. I can do that just by hitting F5, and it will extend it all out to the end, right? So if I hit play, you can see what we're kind of getting there, right? So it's hitting that last frame, like it's kind of slowly starting to accelerate, or it's like accelerating, like building up speed. But then that last little bit, it sort of whips to a stop, right? Like sort of pops to a stop. And so you can see sort of the effect we're getting from that. And this is just with a ball, right? This is, there's no personality in this thing. I am just doing this based off of how much distance I make it travel from frame to frame, right? And so we can see this visually. If I hit stop, go ahead and extend my onion skin out, you can see all of those drawings, right? You can see the fact that they're kind of close together here at the beginning, and then the distance that it travels is bigger and bigger. And then that last distance it travels is the biggest, and then it kind of springs back to a stop, right? So I tell you that because what most people start doing when they first start animating is they just cut everything in half, right? It's like you wanted that ball to go from one side to the other, and so you just make it travel equal distances every frame. And that feels very like robotic, and it's called linear motion. It feels very like no personality to it at all, no like character to it, right? So just recognize that that's what we're really doing here, is we're animating the illusion that things are moving just by changing them frame to frame. And the distance that they travel is a big part of that, okay? So this is just the first little scratch test. Feel free to save it if you want to. You don't have to. Something you can use, like you can save this file as sort of a practice file. One of the ways I sometimes do that is I just turn off the visibility on that layer, create a new layer. All right, vector, vector, add. And so now I can keep working in this same file and just tinkering and trying things out, right? That's mainly what we're going to be doing for this first few days, is kind of tinkering and learning the software. So, any questions on it so far? Yeah.
I keep actually dragging the pancake layer, but like it's too close to the thing, so I can't like throw it back out.
So grab your red timeline folder, and then you should be able to grab it. This is your computer scan. Question is the rest of it. So we can do it instead of drawing a circle line, copy and just transforming each string. You remember what I said, duplicating result? You can. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Actually, Zane asked a good question. Why do I keep drawing the same circle instead of just transforming it, like duplicating it and transforming it? You can do that. And actually, that's one of the things that we'll practice. That's kind of two different types of animation. So what we're gonna focus on 2 or 3 different kinds in the dancing. But if we did that, that's just like, they call it paper cutout animation or limited animation. It means that we draw it one time and then we move it a little bit with the program, right? So that's kind of like a limited animation. I'm not redrawing the head every time. So I can animate this head bob a lot easier, but at the same time, it's always the same head. right? So, yeah, so it looks a little like you can't have a lot of dynamic motion with that, right? There's no way you could ever rotate a 2D image to make a character like turn all the way around in a circle, right? To do that, you always have to draw new drawings, right? And so it really is going to be a question of the style of animation. Like Disney animation, frame by frame stuff was obviously every frame was a new drawing. Whereas you have stuff like a lot of the stuff that's made for TV is limited animation. It'll be like a good example is I don't know, people cringe or shout hooray when I bring this up, but the new like Teen Titans Go or whatever, yeah, I got a cringe over it. So I like it. Like it wasn't built in anyway. All that is a character that's broken up into different pieces, and they animate those different pieces. Strangely, The Simpsons is a new frame drawn every time. They just use, like they shop that out to other countries where they can do it less or more inexpensively. And so they have them drawn over and over and over again. And so for some reason instead of drawing one Homer and having his mouth move, they're just drawing it over and over again. So like there's a lot of different techniques for it, but they're each going to end up having a different aesthetic and style to it. So where we see TV animation looking a little more like cheap, like it looks a little simpler, that's because we're reusing that same thing over and over again, and the characters never change poses extremely dynamically. Now that's not true with everything. Again, Adventure Time, some of that is done frame by frame. I think Steven Universe is, but then regular show, I'm pretty sure is limited. So it's kind of show to show. It's really a production process. The interesting thing about 2D animation is, especially it's most heavily done in TV right now, and their turnaround time is ridiculous. Like an episode of a TV show, they get about 2 weeks to make that. It's one of the reasons I picked 2 weeks to finish a short film in here is to try to get us in that process of like, how do I just get this done, right? And so like that's why limited animation will be used, whereas 2 hours of a film, maybe you have a bigger budget, maybe you have more time to do that. So, okay, did that answer the question? When we get into the rigging part, there's going to be a lot more of that, duplicate that circle and do that. Feel free to try that too, but there are going to be times when you have to redraw it every time. So, okay. I feel like that was a lot of Toon Boom information I just threw at you, right? Rather than continuing to throw more Toon Boom information at you, I think you have enough to where you can actually start playing with it, right? Like, we'll have a little bit of downtime toward the end of class here, I think. I have an hour. So what I'm going to move on now is to character design. I want to talk a little bit about how to design characters for animation. Obviously, you are going to want to design characters that you can draw over and over and over again, right? Again, 24 frames of animation in a second, right? So that means if you are going to do 5 seconds of animation, 5 times 24, you have 120 drawings you have to do. So if you're drawing all this little intricate cross-hatching and detailed like eye textures and all of that stuff, like you're never going to get the animation done, right? You either have to use limited animation or you have to design it in a style that you can do those drawings at a reasonable pace, right? So that is one of the things I want you to just keep in your mind, that there's a whole bunch of things that we can do to simplify that. For instance, we can fake texture, right? Instead of having a character that has a checkered shirt and we have to draw every checker on the shirt every time, maybe you just do sort of like a couple of gestural lines that implies the checker, right? Instead of drawing like a brick texture, having to draw every brick, Maybe you just sort of do a few hatches that imply a brick texture in certain areas. So I want you to start looking at that, like watch some cartoons over the next few days and start looking for examples of where the artists simplified so they could get the project done. The other thing is all of that detail is going to be in motion, which is different than when you're just doing it for an illustration. And when you have all of that texture detail in motion, it starts to get noisy. It's almost like too much stuff happening on the screen at once, right? So those are some things in terms of style for you to adapt your own drawing style to. What I really want to focus on most today, though, is how to start building your character. So I'm going to get back here to my folder, lectures, Anim. Okay, so I've sort of developed this this technique that I want you to try, okay? And so we're going to do this in a couple of quick practices, figure drawing practices. So what I'm going to do, let me grab one here. I have a bunch of images from a figure drawing website, okay? Again, this is where some mild nudity may pop up. Crap, I got to post this on YouTube, don't I? Let's see. Maybe they won't kick us off. Let's try to do some actually, these are for the most part pretty safe. Okay. So let's start with this one right here. Actually, okay. So, in a figure drawing class, how many of you have taken a figure drawing class before, right? So in a figure drawing class, you would maybe do a contour line drawing where you're drawing the outside parameter or outside form to get the volumes, right? Or maybe they would have you do like some sort of gesture drawings where you're just trying to loosen up your arm, right? I'm going to have you do these drawings in a way that really just has you focusing on what is going on with the anatomy here, okay? So we'll start with this one here in a minute, but I want to show you just with the snipping tool what we're looking for, okay? So I want you to look for a couple of things. Okay? The first, I want you to look for three main masses, okay? So the first mass is right here, right? Let me erase that, use a different color. The first mass is her pelvis, right? So we know that there's a pelvic bone in there that her hip socket is socketed into. But we're just gonna draw this as a quick circle, right? Something like this, okay? The second one is her rib cage. So it's kind of turned away from us, but it's up here, right? And then the third one is her head, right? So it's really those three circles, right? So once we have that, once we have where those three masses are, I want you to think about two lines, okay? Those two lines are the angle of her shoulders and the angle of her hips. So think about the sockets where her shoulder is connecting into that rib cage and where her legs are connecting into that pelvic bone, right? So if I were to draw that for the pelvis, maybe I would draw a circle here and a circle here, right? I don't really have to draw those circles, but really what I'm looking for is just to connect those two together with a line, okay? So there's one, and there's the other, right? The same with our shoulders. You'll see our shoulders are kind of doing this diagonal line there. Okay? And then from there, I can just start connecting all of these things together and do some lines for the legs and the arms. So her arm is kind of doing like this. Her arms are kind of at a weird angle. And her legs doing like this. And then one of the other things I like to do is I like to draw a line all the way through her spine, right? So you get sort of like something like this, right? So these are the masses that I need you to be thinking about, okay? Those main masses, the pelvis, the rib cage, the head, those are the three biggest volumes that move in a character, right? Um, the little sticks for the arms and legs, those are just so we understand what we're looking at, really. Um, and then those other two things, though, are pretty important, right? Those diagonal lines, the one for the shoulders and the hips, that's called contrapposto, okay? So I can pull up some more images here in a minute, but basically what contrapposto means is our spine has a tendency to curve as we shift our weight just to keep us in balance, right? So if I shift over in this angle, this hip will come up and my spine will kind of counter to catch all of that, right? So what it means is that if your spine is, or if your shoulders are angled this way, right, then that means your hips are usually going to do the opposite, right? You're going to get this countering angle, right? And so those are the things to look for because that's just kind of physically how that happens. Now, if we get that countering angle, right, like if I have my shoulders are that angle, my hips are this angle, usually my spine is going to make this curve through that, okay? That's all I really need you to know about anatomy. Like, it's good to know all of the rest of that stuff for the drawing quality, but I can do every animation I ever need to do with these three spheres and this collection of lines, right? After I have all of the motion figured out with these spheres, then I can put whatever illustration I want on top of it. I can, it can be super cartoony or it can be photorealistic. These volumes are the biggest things we're going to be animating in 2D because we can visualize how they change over time. And that's actually one of the things we're going to do next class period is just animate some of these volumes by themselves and see how they're connected together, right? So, what I'd like to do, very briefly, is I'm going to pop up an image here. Am I? Close that down. I want to pop up an image, and I'm going to give you a very short amount of time to do that sketch that I just showed you, okay? So you can do that sketch in Toon Boom. You can do it wherever you want to. But I want you to just take a minute, like I'll give you, let's say 30 seconds, an image to draw those three masses, the contrapposto, and the limbs as sort of a stick figure. Okay, y'all ready? You need a minute? No. Okay. you actually don't have to do it in Toon Boom if you'd rather do it in Photoshop or something like that. The USB cord for some reason messes up. Okay, so we're going to do a few of these, and then I'm going to get you to practice these at home. That's actually one of the exercises that we're going to be doing. So let's just pull up a few and we can practice it, and then I'll show you how that's going to relate to our character design. So let's start with this fella right here. Let me get a timer up. Let's go ahead and, for the first one, let's go ahead and give you a minute. And then the next one we'll go to 30 seconds. So, okay. And go. Feel free to draw the sword as just a line too. All right, time's up. How'd you do? Terrible? That's all right. So the trick of this, and one of the reasons I do it timed, is so you have less time. It's very easy to get in the habit of like, oh well, I'm just going to go ahead and start drawing the fingers anyway. Like really, just think of those three masses. Like sort of breaking this apart is part of the trick. So I'm actually going to go ahead and copy these images over to our class folder. Samira mentioned that. It may actually make it easier if you want to pull up the same image on your desktop instead. So I'll go ahead and put this under Greg, 2D animation, resources, and we're going to be using these later anyway. Okay, so let's do like maybe two more in class. Let's try something really dynamic. Let's try this guy here. Okay, and you want to do a minute again, or do you want to do 30 seconds? 30 seconds. So that'll force you to like really, I tell you what, I'll give you 35 seconds. Give you 5 seconds for your eyes to adjust. Okay, we're gonna do this ninja. He should be very clear about what's going on with these masses here. Okay, there we go. Ooh, 30 seconds go so fast. All right. So, you want to try one more? All right. So I know. Like don't sweat it. Like this is part of the practice. You'll get more chance to practice this later. So let's go ahead and go to what's on the next one. There we go. Let's try that one. That one's interesting. Oh, I gotta set a timer. Oh, you getting some free seconds here. Okay. It is a 2D animation class. That is a 2D animation kind of thing to do. All right. So, one of the, I'll show you this really quickly. In our 2D animation class, in the drop boxes, you'll know that this first item here is 20 character thumbnail sketches. So just put all of those images up there. Just do this for 20 of them, okay? And that's going to make up 10 of the points for this week's Dropbox package, okay? I would encourage you to do that tonight because we're going to start adding more stuff onto it. But again, it's not due until the Monday of next week, so a week from today. So just letting you know, that's one of the packages is to do 20 of these, okay? If you don't like the sketches that are up, or the characters that are up there, there is a, yes?
When you choose it for the Dropbox, do you want these in Photoshop or Illustrator or Team?
You can do them wherever you want to, but I would say the best way to turn them in is just a series of JPEGs. So like that's going to be the easiest way for me to just pull them up, look at all of them.
So you have no preference on what we draw on at this very moment?
No, it's just whatever. Right? I would probably encourage you to play around in Toon Boom, which is more sketching practice. But however you kick them out, like you could do it in Toon Boom, do one on every frame, And then I'll just show you later how to export out each of those frames as an individual image. So yes. You can. You could have like you could turn it in as like 4 pages with 5 drawings on them each, or however you want to do it. The biggest thing is like, this is one of those things where I'm not going to be like, that's not good enough, that's only 0.5 points or whatever. Like pretty much if you have 20 images in there, you get all 10 points, right? It's just this is more of an exercise than anything. So I show you this because we're going to, at next class period, we're going to kick off designing the character for our dance scene, which again, you can already get started on this, but those 3 masses are really the most important part of that, right? And I'll show you just, going back to my faculty folder here, sorry. I usually do this on the other screen where it's not as intrusive. So, these 3 masses, they look very familiar, right? So we got our head, our rib cage, and our pelvis, right? This is sort of the basic building blocks of any character, right? And they don't have to be the same size, right? Like traditionally, like a human, we have similarly proportioned, you know, like even if the characters are different shapes, we all pretty much have roughly the same proportion of rib cage to skull, right? Your cartoon character does not. It could have tiny chest, tiny hips, giant head. It could be, you know, all sorts of different shapes, right? But with these, you'll see that you can design all sorts of different characters, right? So if we have these 3 masses, right, all we really need to know now is like which direction the character's head is pointing. Now we can sort of get these little crosshairs on it to get that information, right? And we can connect those all together. We have our entire torso, right? Now, from there, we got those sockets we just talked about. If we sort of figure out where our elbow and our wrist is, we can connect all that together, get some hands. Usually my quickest way that I get hands and feet are just sort of some boxes or some like wedge shapes, right? And I have like a character that I can animate now. Like I can draw this character in under a minute, right? And if I can draw a character in under a minute, that means I can animate with it much quicker. So this is what I use to do my animation. Walking around the room, I see that some of you are a little more like comfortable with different shapes. I saw a couple people doing more like boxy chest masses, and that's probably coming from like a figure drawing class or some drawing habit that you have. That's fine. What you need to do is figure out what your simplified drawing form is. And if you don't have one, feel free to use mine, right? The cool thing about this is from there you can really start to put whatever character you want to on top of this, right? And it's all still going to be that same underlying structure, right? So again, like we can kind of get our side drawing, we know the same proportions, right? But once we have that, we can put this character in whatever pose we want. Like that's still those same masses, right? And so this is how I'm going to be doing most of my animation. And again, you'll see that if, whatever shapes we want to do this, whatever proportions we want to do this in, we can turn them into whatever kind of characters we want to do this. Again, these are very quick little sketches. So this is how I usually get started with character design, right? Is I start with those 3 masses, and those 3 masses are going to tell me something, right? If I look at these 3, let's look at this first one here. Little bitty tiny hips, giant rib cage, sort of smaller head, and that just tells me that there's like a lot of upper body like girth or mass, right? And so for me, that gave me kind of a bulkier character, and I took that and kind of defined that like to even smaller feet, these giant arms, and so that's sort of the masses I would think about when I'm going to design like a more muscular or like I guess machismo character, right? Again, these are very sloppy sketches. So you can see that like these are the first 3 masses that I think of. You also don't have to start with circles, right? Let's say you're wanting to start with you're wanting to do a very boxy character. Maybe you do this with 3 boxes, right? Sometimes I start with just a general shape, right? And then start building from there. So let's say I wanted to do a character that I think of as kind of a rounder, like he's a chubby basketball coach or something like that, right? Then maybe the first thing I start doing is just sort of coming up with that overall shape, right? Maybe my overall shape I want to be something more like this, right? And so from there I can start figuring out those 3 masses, right? And then again, from there I just kind of start adding to what I want that to look like. So this is a very quick process, right? When somebody throws out an idea to you, like you should be able to start sketching these and just cranking these out super fast. Because what this is this doesn't have to be the final drawing. This is how you think on paper. Right? This is how you use the tool to come up with your idea. Okay? So that's the last thing I wanted to exercise today. I'm going to give you a little bit of a longer drawing exercise. Okay? What I would like to do is I'm going to read you a character description. Okay? And then I want you to draw 5 thumbnails of this level of finished, right? Like just quick masses, just sort of rough them out. What is your idea of that character? After we do those 5 thumbnails, I want you to take one of them and start to refine it. Okay, so this is sort of an in-class exercise that we're going to do. So give me 1 second here to get that open. Classes. Okay. So, character 1, Alex. Alex lives with his mom. He works at a hospital delivering meals to patients. He's fat and balding, and he's in his late 30s. He has abandoned all other forms of clothes once discovering how comfortable scrubs are. Okay? So, I'll give you a minute. Sort of think of that. What is that? Keep in mind, it's not cheating to Google things. Like you can Google image search some ideas for, like, just type in like bald man, type in scrubs, like whatever, and start pulling ideas from that. So I'll give you a second or two to come up with that. And then what I want you to do is 5 minutes on the timer. I want you to do a thumbnail a minute, okay? So do 5 thumbnails of Alex. Again, you can do that in Toon Boom. If you're feeling more comfortable in Photoshop, feel free to open up Photoshop. So I'll give you 5 minutes and 15 seconds for that time. Tell me when you're ready. Everybody ready? Need a minute? All right, I can't tell, so I'm just going to go ahead and say go. So go, 5 Alexes. Okay, we're about halfway on the time. Just giving you some heads up. Okay. So let's try this just for a minute. Also helps us stretch our legs. Let's hop up and walk around and see what everybody got. Let's just see like we all had the same like idea. I'll go ahead and toss mine out here too. I'm kind of doodling on the iPad. Um, and really all we're looking for now is form. Like what sort of shape did we come up for this character? So I thought there's something interesting walk around. People took two different cues from this. Some people heard fat and just automatically started like a big circle, right? And that works. Some other people though, like particularly I want to call Max out here, heard scrubs And scrubs are very like square shaped, right? Like you had one that was really cool. That was just like he's just made up out of three squares, and like that's really neat. Like that you took that and like without even seeing any detail, I could see scrubs in that, right? That he's wanting to wear like this over and over again. Um, Go ahead and save those if you want to. Like we don't have to, but like if you want to keep expanding on those, you can. What I'd like to do is another little test like that. Like let's do another short one before we sort of elaborate on that. Before we do that, I'll show you a couple of examples from some stuff that I think is really helpful, which is, if I can ever find it. Yeah, here we go. So some of the, hold on, there. So is this the right one? No, this isn't it. It's not the right thing. Yeah. So we can start seeing this happening in a lot of animation or a lot of stuff, right? We have one style of figuring out these masses that I've heard called the bean, like that you have this sort of like bean-shaped torso to connect that together. But like you can start seeing that we can take all sorts of different geometric shapes to start giving our character personality, right? And so think about that as well. Like we don't, again, I started showing you this with these circles, but in your overall character shape, we can come up with all sorts of varieties of masses, right? Like this guy's kind of made up more of cylinders, right? Versus some of these more boxy characters here, right? So a lot of this is about proportion and variety, right? We have, yeah, so here's a very similar idea. Small, medium, large. Do you mix the size up? Do you mix the proportions up? And again, this is a little bit more of the, this is from a different book. So I think that there's a lot that you can get just by trying something different with every one of these, right? Every time you start a new version of this, try starting it with a different shape, right? Don't always just kind of do the same like three, like a small head, slightly bigger chest, slightly bigger belly. Like try a different variety of that and see if you can get that. What if the chest and the pelvis mass was the same size, but the head is really small, right? What do you get from that? If it doesn't work, the worst that happens is you wasted a minute, right? And it was 1 minute, so who cares, right? Like I'm sure we waste plenty of minutes every day. So let's try a different character this time. So I want to go ahead and go down here to Gwendy. So Gwendy is very cute. She is 4 years old. Her favorite food is cherry suckers, and she has red pigtails that she cut herself. She has freckles, she's missing a front tooth, and she hates all other kids. So 5 Gwendys in 5 minutes, and go. We got about a minute left on this one. All right. So how'd that one go? Are you happier with that one? All right. Let's walk around and see what everybody got. I like walking around. Walking is fun. It's like good cardio. Ooh, these are so much fun. Okay, so tell you what, let's do. How are we doing on time? We're close enough. Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and call it a day from there. I'm really enjoying these. I'd like to do a couple more, some warm-ups tomorrow, because I have the whole. Actually, I just like writing these things. So I have a whole bunch of them here. So we're going to do a couple of things tomorrow. We're not going to go over a syllabus, so that means we'll have a little bit more time to do some work and get some stuff done. But start coming up with ideas. Just, you kick back in bed on your way to sleep tonight. Start kind of coming up with some ideas of some people who don't want to go to the dance club. Like, who is it that's not want? Is it Father O'Callahan? Like, is it like who is it that doesn't want to be at the dance club? We're going to make them dance anyway, right? So that's what we're going to start building toward on this character design thing. So where I've written this description, start coming up with some of your own descriptions for people who don't want to go dancing. All right. And so that's what we're going to do. Is our last three pieces is we're going to make those people dance to a very specific beat. We're going to put them all together, and what we'll have is about a maybe 2.5 minute little animated short of all of our characters dancing to the same piece of music. I think it'll be fun, and we'll learn some ways of doing that. So we'll start with a couple of warm-ups tomorrow, do a couple more of these little character sketches, and we'll probably even refine one out a little bit just to kind of say, after we pick those thumbnails, take one of them and start fleshing that out into a better drawing, right? And we're also going to practice a little bit about how to connect those three main masses together in sort of a theoretical way, right? So I'm having fun. I hope you're having fun. I'll see you tomorrow, and thanks for being patient and listening to me talk for 3.5 hours. hours. All right.
Does the character have to be a human?
No. But that, actually, some of the characters we get into a little bit later here in these sketches are alien and or fantastical. So yeah, we no.
They have to have 4 limbs.
So tomorrow you can release that here.
No, tomorrow's just the 20 thumbnails of the figure drawing stuff. But again, I'm not gonna like really take that up until Monday. But yeah, that would be probably the where to stay on task. So. Okay.
4 limbs. They have to have 4 limbs.
Are you wanting more or less than 4?
I'm not sure yet. I need to think of like what I want to do. If I want to do some sort of like humanoid creature or
So I would say like
monster.
I would encourage 2 legs.
Okay.
Everything else is game. Like everything else is fair game. You could probably do 4 legs if you wanted to, but that's going to be, it gets a little more complicated in terms of like weight shifting and stuff like that. And it's a little harder for us to shoot reference for something like that. Like I can imagine 2 more arms coming out of my shoulders. It's a little harder to figure out how I would move as a quadruped. So.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Let me see if that recorded. Hopefully it did.
Please.
Let's cross our fingers.